Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Best Books Ever. I'm Tyler, and today we are continuing Wise Man's Fear by Patrick Rothfuss, chapters 61 through 90. We are now officially over halfway. Finally. Feel like how long was Name of the Wind? Name of the Wind was like 700 pages? Something like that, right? It was somewhere around there, right? This one is, I think, over 1,000. I think just about 1,000, maybe. So right now we'd be essentially like 600 pages. So right now we're about the length of the first one. We're getting to it, and there's still about like 40% left. So a lot of stuff. I think in this part, in particular, there was quite a few big things that have happened. Maybe some foreshadowing. Um, yeah, just kind of opening up avenues. Also, probably the hardest chapter, in my opinion, to read in maybe the entire two books, but we will get to that. Yeah, so I guess we'll start at the very end, as we normally do. They are right on the precipice of getting to these bandits, getting to their base. They just killed one of the lookouts, the sentry. So that means they're right there. So, um, so like predictions of how they're gonna get there. Again, I've read this before, but I don't remember exactly how they get there, how they win, because we know that Kvothe is in a tough spot, right? Because he's the leader, and he is already known to them of being an arcanist, but he doesn't really have anything. We know like the one trick that he really had up his sleeve was the whole fire thing. Even that was pretty weak. But before they left, they doused the fire. So it's like, what does he have now? Um, yeah, any sort of possible tricks up his sleeve, literally like in his pockets and stuff. Obviously, we know about the trick, the little like quote unquote lightning that he used when he was getting in the process of being killed by those two hired mercenaries. Um, that I don't think, I think at most we got like soft confirmed that they were sent by Ambrose. Um, but yeah, so we maybe something like that possibly, but even then, like he is nowhere near as useful as Martin or um, Tempi or really any of them. He can't fight. He has no fighting ability. So but yeah, they're right there. That's kind of where we're ending off. So I think next time we are going to get to a good spot. We're going to start off at a good spot where we are going to see them, confronting them, seeing how many people there actually are there, because that's big, right? That was one of Cole's biggest things of like, we don't know how many there are. There could be 5, there could be a dozen, there could be 20. It's like, how many people could we really take on? How smart is this? But yeah. Let's see, what else do we have? Oh yeah, speaking of Cole's fighting ability, I think this is another example of, on one hand, you can look at Quote's, his life, his journey, and everything, and say, wow, he kind of just gets handed everything. But I think it's really just the idea of him being like a super opportunist. He just kind of stumbles into stuff, and then he's able to lock it away for later, and he knows when to utilize this random information or this like random experience that he's gained, right? So we just talked about how he is not a fighter, but he is in the process of learning from Tempi many things, right? One of them is the Lithani. We're not quite sure what this is. We're like, maybe it's like a way of thought, maybe possibly sort of like a religion. We thought at first it was just their like fighting style or something. Doesn't seem to be the case. Um, yeah, we are learning that. So maybe that is how he eventually gets to a point where he himself is very mighty physically, and it's not just him being an arcanist, right? Um, I don't know. I don't know. Aside from that, I love that he is learning his language. We know from Kvothe and from Kote, like present time, even with his thing with Chronicler, and him taking like 60 seconds or whatever to like decode and learn Chronicler's shorthand for him writing the story. That he is very, very persistent when it comes to learning languages, and so now him learning the Ademic language, him also understanding why Tempi is like his facial expressions, and him like jittering, and him always looking away, avoiding eye contact. It's like, oh, that's because that's part of his like, his like culture and the way that they communicate with each other. I love his explanation to, why don't you just smile? Smiling is easier than doing these hand gestures. It's also natural. And he's like, no. It's a difference between being civil and being a barbarian. And he talked about like how you would use more facial expressions with like friends or family, people that are close to you, because those things don't matter. Being civil, it's sort of adjacent to being formal and informal, where it's like with people you know, people you trust, you can be as informal as you want because you know each other. But aside from that, being in a public setting or towards like strangers, you use the formal way, which is the eye contact thing, the gestures. Yeah. So that was really cool, and that explained a lot, because when we got introduced to Tempi's character, there was there's this like expectation of him being an Adem mercenary, and us learning about him. And looks were definitely deceiving. Again, because you look at him, it's like, okay, he's wearing the like blood red clothing, which we've heard about. But other than that, like, he doesn't look imposing in the slightest. He looks about as imposing as Kvothe would look. Barely speaks. Again, the whole like eye contact thing, the gestures being misinterpreted for being nervous or fidgeting. It's like, wow, this guy's really, are these, the whole like fairy tales and stuff about them, are they greatly exaggerated? Later on we know that's not true. Obviously, we learn everything I just spoke of, but then we also get some examples of it when he was fighting, what's his name? Deden? What was his name again? Deden, yeah. Fought him, and it was like, oof, you could tell immediately that he outclasses him. And then we obviously saw the bar fight, which was much more telling, because that actually went all the way. Yeah. So it is very fascinating. I'm wondering how much more Kvothe will learn, like what will actually come of all of this, because like he does learn their language. The way they interact with each other is cool. I don't know when he would use that. I do like Kvothe saying that. How exactly did he put it? That he was like, he's obsessed with secrets or something like that. So all of this is knowledge. We know this from the over book and a half that we've read of Kvothe so far, is that he is always hungry for knowledge, no matter what kind of knowledge it is, except for poetry. Carries that down from his father. does not care a lick for poetry. Although there was the one time that he wrote a poem, and obviously he was writing the poems, the songs and stuff, that doing all that stuff for the mayor, and he was like, there's only one thing that can cause me to write a poem. Obviously inferring to Denna. But other than that, he's craves knowledge, needs to uncover secrets. That's why, everything, right? And being at the university, more specific stuff when it comes to like naming, or the copper door, the 4-panel door, so even something like this, it's like, oh, it could just be his, his wanting to know more. Again, the Adem, very secretive. Again, very much like, is this just fake? Is it exaggerated? Is it a folk tale the same way the Chandrian are? But then, you look at Kvothe and um, his experience with the Chandra, and it's like he knows that a lot of these fairy tales or folk tales are true. You know, that's why I think a lot of things that he comes across, for a split second, the trying to think of the word, the like more I don't know, his just like reflex for a lot of things is like, oh well, you know, he just kind of dismisses them. But then he thinks about all the experiences, not just the Chandrian thing, but just all of his, you know, his experiences of like, no, this could be real because that was real. You know, I mean, him even learning magic, sympathy, and all this. It's like weird and fantastical things do exist in this world. So dragging that back to the Adem, it's like part of him wants to be like, there's no way. There's no way that they hold in their words and that makes them strong. That gives them iron skin. But on the other hand, maybe it's possible. You know, he's seen stranger things. Um, so yeah. Aside from that, though, the one useful thing, or at least what you know, what I can see, the more practical thing is the Lithani, and it's like, what is that? You know, even Tempi talks about it. And he's like, we don't even fully understand what it is. It just is, right? But maybe him learning that, like I said, maybe that is how he's able to unlock another part of himself. Again, just add something else to his, you know, to his like toolbox, right? Um, Again, Kvothe is just stumbling into opportunity, and he's able to utilize these opportunities to the point where he learns all of these things, some of them intentionally, many of them unintentionally, to the point where you just would have had to have lived his life to become him. But yeah, good stuff there. Lots of Lithani stuff, lots of Adem stuff we just knocked out. Learn the language, gestures, all that stuff. We'll probably get to the Denna stuff last because Denna stuff is my favorite. So we'll save the best for last. But some other stuff we got. Well, we just spoke of the university and naming. Let's go on that for a second. I like the realization that Kvothe has when he is talking about, he tells his story, right, about the screw in the child's stomach or whatever. And you know, they all, some laugh, some are very upset about the story. It's like there's no point to that story, right? I do love how much Tempi laughs at it though. He finds it very funny. But I love him sort of explaining to Martin why his father told him that story, and many stories like it, where he's like, you know, I would bombard my father with questions all day, every day, and so he would do something like that to like distract him. And I mean, he knew himself, right, that there was no point to that story. But if I tell Kvothe that story, he will look for some sort of answer to it, right? He'll tell the story and then be like, so do you understand? And of course he doesn't, because there's nothing to understand. There's no answer to like the question that he's asking Kvothe for an answer for doesn't exist. But he would do that because he knows Kvothe, like we just mentioned, is obsessed with secrets and with puzzles, all that stuff. And while Martin found that sort of mean and like I don't know, mean, I guess is probably the only word. Kvothe sort of explained it as like, well, no, it wasn't him being mean. It was actually incredible and very clever, because you know, asking someone a question and giving them the answer just gives that man a fact. Just a little fact. I'll tuck that away for later, I guess. But the harder and harder the question, the more impossible the question, then it becomes less about the answer and more about the hunt, more about the journey, more about how do you, like, what steps do you take to try to get the answer, and that sort of builds upon your character, rather than just being like, hey, fun fact, and then, whatever. Um, again, so there are, and this is kind of my like unintentional point that I've made so far is that, again, this is another example of like Quoth picking up these little things that all sort of mold him into where he is today. Again, something like that most parents don't do with their children, right? They don't do this. They don't give them impossible, you know what I mean? Like, so again, it, just kind of like flexes his brain, I guess, from a very young age. But reeling this back, gets back to Elladan because Quoth realizes that, or at least again, this is what his determination is that he feels that Elladan has been doing exactly what his father used to do, which is, I can't just give you the answer to everything. I mean, partly because I'm sure there is no answer to naming, right? Because everyone has the name of things as it relates to them. So I'm sure there's not just like a common name for the wind or for stone or whatever. But also because it's like, again, I can't just give you the answer. You have to find it yourself, you know? And so that right there, I think, grew at least a small appreciation for what Elladan has been doing. And I'm sure, hopefully, when he gets back to the university, whenever that is, unless he never does. But I'd be shocked. I'd be shocked if he never makes his way back. Probably won't be for a while, though, because it seems like this is taking a while. But they are at the base, so I assume this is probably the end of this journey, and then he'll make his way back to the mayor. And I guess the mayor, pretty close to being done there, I assume as well, because jumping to another point now, before he left, I guess he was sent away. The mayor did say that they just agreed on like a formal troth, right? So I guess to me that means they're together now. They've agreed. They've agreed on a relationship there, so that's cool. So Quoth wins, right? Quoth succeeds. Yeah. So when he gets back to Elladan, I'm sure I'll have a more appreciation for him, maybe pay more attention, try a little harder, So that'll be nice. That'll be a nice interaction to have. And I guess we'll just jump to the mayor real quick with Melwan. Love that. Love that they're together, right? It worked. Hopefully they seem to like each other a lot. We don't really know too much about Melwan and her feelings. But I hope that relationship goes well. I hope that Quoth comes back and he's like, did it, got that thing for it, took care of those bandits. You seem to do good with Melwan. You said third time pays for all, whatever. I don't even know what he could. I mean, at this point, because, so you remember the first time Mayor said that Quoth was in his debt. He couldn't really do anything super extravagant, like give land or a title, which he felt like was the least that he could do, right? So imagine the most he felt he could do. It's insane. Imagine Quoth going back to the university and telling Willingham, hey, so I got a patron. It's Mayor. It's the Mayor Alvaron, which would be insane in itself. But then also him going back and being like, I also have a title now and land. They would be like, you're lying. We don't believe you for a second. That would be that'd be really funny. That'd be incredible. But he said he couldn't do it because he was like, because my whole sickness thing, like I don't want it getting out, and so if I did that, then people would ask questions that I don't want to answer, whatever. So like, oh, you have me in your debt. And then the second debt was this whole Melwan thing, right? Like it seems that they're together, so boom, Quoth succeeded. Third would be him taking care of this whole bandit situation. But at that point, do we need to be secretive? At that point, does Quoth earn a title and land? Does this story take a very drastic turn, and Quoth is now very well off? You know, I don't think that would just solve all of his problems. I think short term it would. I think long term it would bring up even more problems because now he has to like be in that realm of like having a title and having land and having to deal with all the, I'm sure, the amazing things, but also frustrations that that come with being at that station, right? But that'd be interesting. That definitely would be interesting. We'll see though. We'll see. Um, what else do we have? Like I said, keeping the dentist stuff for last. Um, where I talked about the bandit thing. Oh, real quick with that though, because I've already kind of talked about them going to the bandits. People seem all right, Didon obviously very frustrating. Martin seems cool, teaching him how to track. Uh, Tempi is interesting. The more and more we learn about him, he's cool. Hespe, not a real no. She's the one who I feel like is making the least impact on the group. But whatever. But I wanted to talk about the just another example of something that Quoth does, and we've seen this a few times now at this point, where Quoth will connect dots that shouldn't be connected or just straight up shouldn't exist. Like it's not only dots that aren't connected in any way, but they're dots that are completely made up in his own mind. And so a conclusion that Quoth seems to have come to is that um, the mayor sent him out here as a sent him out here on a wild goose chase. He wanted to send him out here to get him out of here while he finalizes stuff with Melwan or whatever. Um, he just basically with the idea that okay, I've got what I want, I don't need you anymore, and like him as stationing being like the king or whatever, um, can use people as he sees fit. And so he sent him out here, not really expecting him for him to succeed. Quoth, why would he choose Quoth as the leader? Like, I'm sure there's dozens, if not hundreds, of people that would make a better leader than Quoth. Um, in his mind, he's like, oh, if he fails, then either he dies out here, which is whatever, I don't care. He comes back and fails, and I can just kick him out and maybe not have to owe him something that I've already said I owe him twice over now. He comes back and succeeds, and it's great. Now he has good graces with like the king or whatever that is expecting the taxes from the whatever thing. And this is also enforced by the fact that they were talking earlier with Martin about there's many places that are on maps. They are technically on the map, but they're not actually documented, right? And so this is, they're kind of here. He says something like the edge of the map is not only on the edge, there are edges in the middle as well. Just saying that there are places that are not well documented, and so they just kind of fill it over. It's like, this is a forest. Who cares? All this is forest. It's like, well, there's so much of it. There's hundreds of miles. He compares it to domesticated and undomesticated animals, where it's like, there's a difference, right? And there's a lot of stuff that is wild. It may look all the same, but it is very much not. Yeah. So just again, I fully believe though that this is just Quoth connecting dots that aren't there. Again, we look back to the Devi situation where he fully convinced himself that Devi sold his blood. Fully convinced himself. And it's like, no, she wouldn't do that. Why would she do that? That makes literally no sense. If you were late on your payments, possibly, quite possibly, I think there was a little wiggle room there where maybe she would have, she likes Quoth enough to not immediately do that. Maybe, there'd be some other ways for her to, but definitely wouldn't do it beforehand. Because again, what kind of business would she be? Again, we don't need to get into that again because that wasn't this part, but wouldn't make any sense from a business perspective, which she prides herself on for her to do that. So again, on paper, he like, it's like that Always Sunny in Philadelphia meme with what's his name? Charlie? Is Charlie the name of the character or his real name? The actor's name. I don't remember, but it's that one meme of like the dude with the crazed expression, and he's standing in front of a cork board with a bunch of papers and like red string connected to it and whatever. It's that. It's basically what Quoth did with the Devi situation and what he's doing with the mayor situation. Again, sometimes what it is what it is, and there is nothing deeper to it. That's what was true with the Devi thing, where it's like, no, that's not what happened. And so I think it's possible here. I don't know. Could be what the mayor's thinking. The mayor, while we've seen him very sickly, he is very clever, he is very smart, and he is powerful. Again, he has spent decades in his position. Like he knows what he's doing. So it's possible, but I just don't believe it. You know? I I do think it's weird, but I also think the mayor loves testing people. And he's tested Cole time and time again, and I think this might be like the third and final test for him to fully be in his good graces. I think this is the last thing that the mayor needs to fully trust Quoth and maybe bring him in as like one of his people and be like, yes, I want you here. I want you at this station. I'm going to take care of you or whatever. Um, that's just what I believe, though. I don't know. What else do we have? Only a few things. Yeah, pretty much some mayor stuff, and then we'll end on the Denna stuff. So early on, I did just want to point this out. The relief that obviously Quoth felt, but I think us as the reader also felt when, so there was the situation where the mayor was being sick. Quoth accused Caudicus of poisoning the mayor, right? Like, oh, you've been being slowly poisoned over the past months, years, whatever. And they had the whole like bird thing, put the medicine with the birds start dying, then we know. Birds weren't dying. Very quickly, the mayor was unraveling the trust that he has grown, a little bit of trust that he has grown for Quoth up until that point, with the accusations, and then there was something else too. I forget what it was, but then he posted a guard outside of Quoth's door. Quoth snuck out, saw Denna, came back. Guards were going crazy. Now there's more guards, can't leave under the order of the mayor, whatever. Stape was untrustworthy of him as well, rightfully so. I think there's ever a point in which we're really supposed to dislike Stape, especially when we learn that he's known the mayor since they were children, and it's like, oh, he's just caring for his friend, for like his someone who he may even view as a brother, like. I think it's very easy in other stories for it to be like, oh, the right-hand man, the advisor is like evil or something, and he's slowly feeding bad information to the mayor so he's actually, the king or the mayor's, his the advisor's puppet, and he's, that sort of story. But it wasn't. It was just, he just cares for him, whatever. And now Stape and Quoth are cool, which is awesome. He even said that he owes him a debt, and he gave him like the ivory ring or whatever, or bone. It was ivory, bone. I don't know, bone, right? Yeah. But anyway, like him getting there, and him coming back, and him like charging towards the mayor, and the mayor meeting in the secret room, and it's like the mayor's about to go off on him. And then Stape comes in with a dead bird. And we find out that he has been replacing the birds that have been dying with new ones. And there's been a handful, maybe a couple handfuls, like they've just been dropping dead at an alarming rate. And Stape, we learned, wasn't doing anything bad. He wasn't scheming with Caudicus. He was merely just like, oh no, the birds that the mayor requested, because he said like they make him feel better, like the atmosphere or whatever, they were dying, and he's like, oh no, I don't want the mayor to be without his birds. I also don't want him thinking about death when he's been in such poor health lately. I'm just going to quietly replace them. He wasn't doing anything wrong. He was in fact doing what, like, he was going above and beyond to try to accommodate the mayor, you know. But the rush of relief was just like, oh, the medicine was poison, and here's proof staring the mayor right in the face. All of a sudden, Kvothe is now in his good graces again. You know, that was such, like, again, the only word I can use is relief. Like, it was immense relief. And I remember leading up to this, I was trying to remember, like, how do we get to this point? Because I know, again, up to this point, I was like, I know that the mayor doesn't kick Kvothe out. You know, like he doesn't do that. So how do we get to the point where the mayor finally trusts Kvothe, and it's like, oh, Stapes was replacing the birds, not knowing why the birds were there, that they're getting fed medicine that was poison or anything like this, right? Again, he was completely innocent. But it was so good, you know. And then on top of that, we have the Caudicus thing. I don't remember if we ever see him again or like learn anything about him. We know that what's that guy's name? It was like the mayor's dog or whatever, you know, like he's like in charge of their army or whatever, and he's a very scary man. You do not want to get in his bad side. He's like hunting Caudicus down. I don't remember if they ever capture him and kill him or if we see him again. I don't remember. But there is like looming questions with him as well. Of like, why was he because up until that point there was the suspicion by Kvothe that, oh, maybe he's not actually an arcanist. Maybe he is just a fool. Maybe he is just, deceiving the mayor, doing all this stuff, getting paid for, pretty high station, all this stuff. But no, he did like touch Caudicus's, what was it called? Gilder. It was like, it's real. It bit me. So why, normally when that happens, I mean, either Caudicus was trying to kill the mayor for some reason, just for his own reasons. That wouldn't make sense though. Like, why would? So the only thing you could think of is that maybe someone was buying him out, but it's like the mayor already confirmed that I'm paying him very handsomely, and I let him pursue his own. Like, I give him freedom. Like, this is the dream for an arcanist. I mean, the only thing that's the downside is that, like, I mean, I don't know. He doesn't have complete freedom, I guess. Like, but he's given a lot of freedom, a lot of money. Like, why? Like, who? So that's another question of like, I don't remember if that ever gets answered either, or like who it is that paid him off, because that's the only thing we can think of, right? Why else would Caudicus be poisoning him? Doesn't make sense. Yeah, and that leaves us with the Denna stuff. I'll just go in chronological order because the end, the last Denna point I have is what I deem the most difficult chapter to read up until this point, and quite possibly the hardest chapter to read of the entire series so far. Oh yeah, hold on one second. I gotta give me 10 seconds. All right, okay. We are back. Um, yeah. Hardest chapter to read, but we'll get there. Because I am dreading it. Okay. So some Denna stuff. So we get to first time they meet, for real. Like a good meeting or whatever. Kvothe does accuse Denna's patron of hitting her, right? This is obviously piggybacking off of how he knows that Denna's patron, Ash, did lay a hand on her or two back in Trebin. And again, this doesn't sit right with him. I don't think that Kvothe is ever going to like Ash, ever. Like, even if he does meet, or when he does meet Ash, I just don't think it, because in his mind, Denna is perfect and nobody deserves her. And so for anyone to do anything like that, even for a good reason, something that you could conceive as a good reason, he's like, nah, would never. Nope. I would have thought of 100 different ways to get out of the Trebin situation. Nope. And so now that we see it again, she has like a bruise on her face, like above her cheek or something, and then like her leg, she sort of like twists a little bit, and it's like, I fell off a horse, and he's like, I don't believe you. I don't believe you. So that's rough. Again, putting a little bit of a wedge, a little bit of a sore spot. But we get to some nice stuff later on. We get to a very touching moment where Denna, seemingly with a lot of remorse, does apologize to Kvothe for always leaving so suddenly and for long periods of time. She says like, oh, I should go without saying, but I do want to say it, that I am sorry for always leaving, and again, for it being so sudden, and for for periods of time without seeing. It's just kind of what I do. It's always what I've done. I like that moment because I feel like, again, her saying it should go without saying. I think it does. I think it's very clear how much she does want to see Kvothe, and how much she must dislike not being able to see him from just dropping at the dime of a hat. But I like that she does say it, because Kvothe, one, very dense when it comes to Denna. He has blind spots when it comes to her, but also, I think it means so much for her to actually say it out loud, because I think that just strengthens. I think it just strengthens her feelings for him, at least the perception. Again, quote, very dense, very dense. And so for her to feel like she has to say it, and also for her to want to share that information with him, it means a lot on many different levels. So I very much enjoyed that. Yeah. Some other stuff, again, generally I love the scene where he like brought her, snuck into the mayor's estate and they walked around and stuff. That was great. Her seeing the Salus flower, that he compared her to last book, right? It's like, oh, all guys give roses, they all learn romance from from the same old book. So you say flowers, that was great. For her to realize that he was telling the truth, and that, oh no, he is actually studying or being helping out the mayor and all that. Very good stuff. But one thing I really like is her basically calling him out and pointing out how careful he always is around her. Again, him, we know Quote's fear of being just like all the other guys that fawn over her and rush, and we've seen it a million times, right? Like he was many times he was with Denna when she was with somebody, and you can always see how the conversation goes. You can always see when it's near the end, because the guys always start frantically trying to trying to make her happy, trying to buy things. They start being like over affectionate. Um, what was the term that he used? White white knuckled desperation happens to every guy. And so he obviously has this fear of like, I don't want to, in any sense, I don't want to resemble these guys because I don't want there to be even a shred of a possibility of Denna, uh, to put it bluntly, like tossing me aside the way that she tosses aside these other guys. I want to be different. I want to, um, again, not just trip over my own feet running towards her. Um, I want her to be someone that she can rely on, that she can always come back to, even if it means that I never take that next step in our relationship, that's better than losing her forever. And so we wind back to this moment where she just completely calls him out and like says all of the unsaid things. Not all of them, but some of them. Where she like recounts this moment where they were walking together in the town, and she tripped. She like tripped on like a tile or something. I don't know. And without like in the span of a blink, he catches her, writes her up, and then immediately lets go. And there's a couple of things to note of that. One, that very well could have been a possibility for him to embrace her longer, or in a more affectionate way. That was a perfect opportunity for him to take advantage of the situation a little bit, in the way that basically any other guy would, right? But then, other than that, the thing that she says that I love even more is, um, before I even like, she basically said like, before I even knew I was falling, you were there to catch me. And she's like, how closely must you be watching me for you to have done that? And then in our heads we're like, Quoth, when you are together, Quoth is, you are the only thing he's looking at for every second that you are together. And so it's so funny for her to recognize these things. Again, I love that. How closely must you have been watching me, or must you watch me in general, for you to have done that so quickly, like so quickly. It was like you knew I was falling before I did. And we know this though. We know like every time they hang out, Quoth always has to mention like the like curve of her neck, or like the sparkle in her eyes or whatever, right? Like we know how closely. So um I just love that because their relationship, I think, is progressing. Um, I think they are getting more and more bold. I think Denna's doing a lot more of the heavy lifting, with the relationship. Um, and I guess she's making up for her always leaving randomly and for periods of time. Um, but yeah, I love it. I love the relationship so much. I want it to go forward. It's just so tough because I don't think, while Denna has been way more forward with him, not only in her actions but also with what she's saying, and even something like this, her just coming on being like, saying these things is very telling, and her being like, her realizing again, because while she's more forward in her words and her actions, I think we seem to forget sometimes that she has the same insecurities about Quoth that Quoth has about Denna. Um, so while she, I think, is more forward, even if it does, it is masked by her just teasing him, I think that he is gonna have to be the one to come clean. Um, for him to be the one to truly make the first move. There's been moves back and forth. Again, this is a duel. you know, with their words, with their feelings, with their actions. But I think the first real move towards the next step is gonna have to be taken by Kvothe. Um, but we'll see. We'll see. Um, oh, and then we have the moment where where Kvothe follows Denna. Very not cool. Kvothe probably shouldn't be doing that. Just follow Denna, and we have this very interesting conversation between Denna and this other girl, um, saving this girl, which I thought was very cool because we've never seen Denna like that. Her being like aggressive, her like, you know, um, was very ready to kill that man if he just made another step towards this girl, which was very very cool. Um, it does somewhat match her very bold and prideful personality. Again, a way that I think her and Denna are very, or her and Kvothe are very similar. Um, but it was an interesting conversation, basically giving advice to this girl about different paths that she can take. A path of going back to her family, um, doing things for money, and even like the different ways you can do things for money. Of like, well, if you just want to be this, then if you just want to be like anyone, you can do it, or you can sort of be a little more classy, clean yourself up a little bit, and you can take control instead of having the men take control. The reason I point this conversation out is because I think that there is Denna is giving this advice from her heart and from experience. I think she went through all of these things that she's laying out for this girl, and I think it's very telling because we know some of what Denna does from Cole's perspective, obviously. Her leaving, her always being with different guys, getting gifts, her leaving suddenly, her again not only being with a lot of guys but cutting ties with them completely. Her leaving for various amounts of time, going to very different places, all this stuff, right? And then I always come back to the conversation that Kvothe had with Diak about his perspective of Denna, and about how it's like, can you blame her? Like, what, a woman with her lack of connections and family and power and all this stuff, like, what would you do? What would you do? Denna takes advantage of not just her body but her mind and her cleverness, all this stuff, right? Very similar to how Kvothe does in different ways, obviously, but how Kvothe does it as well. And that is one of my favorite interactions. One, because I love Diak and he's a really cool character. I do hope we see more of him. We got 60 more chapters. Maybe we'll see more. Maybe he'll return to the Aeolian, talk to him. It'd be great. But also because I think it does shed a light for us, the reader, as well as Kvothe, as to a little bit of why Denna does what she does. Helps us understand it more and accept it. But with this, I feel like it all clicks into place now. Not all of it, because we still don't really know her past the same way that Denna doesn't know Kvothe's past. Don't know her patron. There are some holes, right? But I feel like this is definitely what she does, right? It's, especially that part about taking control, right? Like now she's in control of the situation, not the other way around where men can use her and then throw her away, right? We little we've seen of Denna where like Denna would not be like that. No way. I couldn't see Denna put herself in that situation. Maybe early on when she first had to maybe, fight for her life and, the same way that Kvothe, after his troop was killed, he sort of had to go through some very rough things to get to where he's at and take any semblance of control of his own life. So now we have Denna, and it's like, we have a better idea of like, okay, that's probably what she does, is that she finds men who have power, have money, all this stuff that she can get material things out of, sure, and but also feel comfortable, have shelter, food, all this stuff, again, maybe some connections to her own studies, whatever, right? Um, and in return, she gives them her company. But when it gets to a point where she does not feel comfortable anymore and they are asking or, maybe demanding things that she is not comfortable with, that's why she leaves in the middle of the night. Leaves in the middle of the night, takes anything she can, never sees them again. She even says to this girl, though, the problem with that is she's burning a bridge. Every choice you make has consequences. Some good, some bad, right? But I think that right there is like, oh, that's what she does. That's why she goes through so many people. Um, I think there was definitely a question there of like, does Denna sleep with these men? And it's like, I don't think she does. I think that's the hard line for her. I think she doesn't. Um, in a way, she is using these people, but in another way, they were gonna use her as well. And again, we go back to the conversation with Diak of like, what else is she to do? What else is someone in her position to do? Like this is how she survives. Um, yeah. And so I think not only giving us some understanding as the reader, I think it gives Kvothe some understanding as well. We don't have confirmation that Kvothe is thinking about these things the way I am or that we are, but I think, I think he does, and I think he should. Um, but yeah, I just found that conversation really eye-opening because she was given this advice, not just like, oh, well, on paper, this all makes sense. Like, no, she was giving it of like, you're about to make some decisions that I had to make to put me to where I am right now. Um, so yeah, very interesting. And then the final point, which also brings us to the hardest chapter, in my opinion, to read of this entire series, is the one where Denna wants to share her song with Kvothe, and she does, and it's a song about Lanier and his story. Slightly different version than the one that he heard from Scarpy and Tarbine. She finishes, it was beautiful from Cole's own recollection. Unfortunately, this stirs up a lot of emotions and a lot of thoughts for him. There are a few different ways to go with this. It does end off with them having a big argument. They do not leave together, and they are done. Did I? Yeah, I did. Okay, I did write that down. Okay. They don't talk to each other again. This ends with the last little tidbit so far is that he does remember, oh shoot, I left and didn't try to contact or talk to Denna at all before we left. Right now in the book where we are right now, chapter 90, it's been about a month. So, but as as he was heading out, he did talk to the Tinker, sent a very hastily written letter to her, not in as much detail or as eloquent as he would have hoped, but basically just saying, I apologize, please let us meet up after this and talk. So we'll get to that in a second. But the argument itself, I think there's a couple different ways to go with it. I don't think he was upset that the information was incorrect. I think that was more of just like a like defense mechanism of like him not really wanting to share what he wanted to say. So he sort of like his mouth was stalling for his brain almost of like, oh well, that was wrong and that's not quite, but and then they had their outbursts. He got really upset with her. He almost called her some very nasty names, and he did. And there was actually a couple names he did call her. They went back and forth, and Denna was upset because from her perspective, he's now starting to look like every other guy that she has met and talked with. He's trying to control her life. He's trying to fix her. He's trying to own her like a dog. he came back and said, well, at least a dog would listen and wouldn't bite the hand that feeds it. Again, so very, very harsh words back and forth. Um, I think that I think Denna did nothing wrong. I think she's reacting the way anyone would react, where it's like out of nowhere. I mean, you're like correcting me, which is okay, sure, whatever. I guess I can take that, even though very offended because the lengths I've gone to collect the scraps and tidbits of this story to make a song of it. But okay, I can sort of let that pass. But now you're just like calling me names and calling me stupid and like trying to, and then it gets compounded with like every other thing that he's trying to help, like trying to find me a patron and talking about Ash, blah blah blah. Um, so again, I feel like she's in the right. I feel like could have been handled a little differently, but I think she reacted the way anyone would. I think Kvothe is completely in the wrong. Um, for me, it all boils down to um, I think it all boils down to the Chandrian. I think part of his anger definitely came from maybe his own fear and maybe just a react, because again, he's very prideful, she's very prideful, they would butt heads in this situation. um I think what he believes is correct, so him correcting her, and then being told you're trying to fix me, I think that hits him close to his heart because she's now comparing him to every other guy, and in his head he's like he doesn't want to be every other guy because he doesn't want to get thrown away, but he also knows he's not like any other guy, so now he's letting his emotions get the better of him. That all is surface level. Like I said, I think it all boils down to the Chandrian, and she's traveled and gathered scraps of information from lost books and whatever to create this song the same way his father did. And we know what happened to his father and his whole troop. Chandrian murdered them, almost killed him too. So I think it's rooted in his fear for what could happen if the song gets out and if the Chandrian learn, which they probably would, who sang it, right? uh, what could happen, what will happen to Denna if that happens. Which again, then in turn, reinforces what she's saying, which is like, you're just trying to fix it, you're trying to do this. And in his head, or I guess in just the reality situation, he is, but he's not explaining himself. He's letting his emotions get the better of him, which I think he's done many times. We've seen this. And not just when he was on the Plum Bob stuff. We've seen it. And so this was a very hard chapter to read because Denna and Kvothe is always usually a very uplifting part of the story. Very rarely do bad things happen. And whenever one of them are sad or whatever, like it very quickly just turns into them enjoying each other's company, right? Some of the Trebin stuff was very, very nice, very heartwarming, and even them like talking here and Sleveron or whatever this place is called. I think, in my mind, what Kvothe should have done is this would have been the perfect time for him to come clean. I think in the heat of their argument, if Kvothe just took a breath and he decided to tell Denna about the Chandrian and about his troop, I think that would have solved everything. I think if he would have just said, hey, I'm sorry for saying these things. It's just, I am trying to protect you. And she would have been confused by that, probably still irritated, right? And he'd be like, no, this is about the Chandrian. She probably would have still been like exasperated. He'd be like, no, listen. I want to tell you about my parents and how they died. The Chandrian killed my parents or something like that. Like him just lead off with something like that. And I think that would have thrown her off balance. And she wouldn't even be able to understand what he just said. Like, what do you, was Chandrian killed? What do you mean? And then him tell the story, probably wanting to just give her the overarching details, but the way Kvothe tells stories, and also him telling Denna, wanting to make sure that she understands completely, probably would have just went full on into the entire thing. Been like, my dad was collecting stories about the Emir, about Lanier, about Chandrian, whatever, just like you are. He had a song, we heard part of it, wasn't finished the whole thing. They died. They were murdered by the Chandrian. I saw them. I can explain to you in gruesome detail the crew that I saw. They almost killed me. Here's what happened. I lived in the woods for a while. That's when I met you for the first time. You remember that? That's why I went to university. Like, basically, basically the first like quarter or whatever of The Name of the Wind that we read, he could have recounted for her. And I think it would have ended off with there being a silence, like a 2-minute silence, and then her being like, "You're serious," and then just being silent. And I think that could have brought them closer together, because he's never told anyone that before, not even Will and Sim. I think he could have even let off with that. I mean, like, I've what I'm about to tell you, I haven't told anyone, not even Will and Sim, because Denna knows Will and Sim. He knows that those are his two best friends. The two people that he's closest to, probably aside from Denna. Um, and then on top of that, I think that would have reinforced his point of like, hey, listen, that would have completely deflated the argument and been like, listen, this is why, like, I said some things just now I didn't really mean, but this is why I said them, because I'm not trying to fix you. I'm just trying to protect you from, I don't want you to be murdered, you know? Um, so I don't know. At this point, I truly do not remember if we see Denna again in the last 60 chapters. Um, I really wish I remembered, but I don't. Like, it's, because from Denna's perspective, we know what happens with Kvothe, right? Like, Kvothe was upset. He tried to write a letter, couldn't do it. Now he gets sent on this quest by the mayor. Hastily writes a letter to her. He's been gone for a month, right? From Denna's perspective, Denna could have felt bad and she could have gone looking for him right after that. Didn't find him, obviously. She could have got whisked away by Master Ash, so didn't even have an opportunity to talk with to Kvothe again. She could have been upset about the whole thing, because she's already said multiple times about how she feels like she messes everything up, and so that could have crept inside of her, those insecurities. So maybe she stayed away for a few days, and now, I mean, like I said, Cole's gone. Um, does she even get his letter? Because we've had a history of letters between the two. Some of them make it to the recipient, some of them don't. I'd say the majority of them don't. um, so do we even see Denna again in this book? Do we see her again? Do we get a correspondence from her at the very least? I really hope we do, and I really hope they can smooth things over. Either from him being like, it's time, I'm gonna tell her about everything, or just them kind of brushing past it, like they've done before with other things, and been like, we can just apologize to each other, understand that was, I don't actually think those things about Denna. Denna on her side, I don't actually think these things about Kvothe. Um, I don't know, but that was a very rough chapter to read, because again, aside from music, Den is the most important thing in his life. So for that to have to happen in that way, tough, very tough. But that is it. That is the chapters this week. I very much enjoyed this. Again, we have all the mayor stuff kind of coming to a head. With the Melwan, seemingly in my mind, it kind of settles down with the Malwans. Because in my mind, I'm like, well, what else do we have? Aside from this bandit thing. But other than that, it's like once that ends, I think the mayor arc is probably over. I would assume. Can't wait to get to the bandit stuff. I'm sure that we're right there, so we'll learn what happens there. With the whole Lethani stuff, I wonder what happens there as well. Like, does Kvothe learn some Adem secrets? That'd be cool. Um, Obviously with Denna, I would love for them to meet up again. What happens between him and the mayor after this? Does he succeed or fail? The bandits, we don't even know. Do we ever go back to the university? Do we get those moments with him and Eladin and him finally understanding? We'll see. That is it. Let me know what you thought of these last 30 chapters. Any predictions for the next? And yeah, because that's it. Till next time, read the chapters and cross our fingers that that was not the last time we've seen Denna.